Hello everyone. Today, Biker Justice Analyst bring you a story full of humanity and compassion. Enjoy listening.
A shy nurse rushed to cool a collapsing stranger, unaware he was a Hell's Angel. Then he asked for her. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the quiet streets of Millbrook as Emily Waters made her way home from another demanding shift at the hospital. Her comfortable nursing shoes padded softly against the warm sidewalk, their familiar rhythm matching the steady beat of her tired heart. The summer heat lingered in the air, though the worst of it had passed for the day. Emily adjusted her shoulder bag, feeling the weight of her scrubs and lunch container inside. She loved these peaceful moments after work, when she could decompress and process the day's events without having to maintain the professional smile she wore for her patients. Being a nurse fulfilled her desire to help others, but as an introvert, the constant interaction could be draining. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the Victorian homes that lined the street, their wraparound porches and carefully tended gardens a testament to the small town's charm. Emily breathed in deeply, savoring the sweet scent of nearby flowering bushes. A gentle breeze rustled through the maple trees overhead, providing brief moments of shade from the persistent warmth. Her thoughts drifted to the patients she'd cared for today. The elderly man recovering from hip surgery who'd finally managed to take his first steps. The young mother worried about her newborn's fever. The teenager with a broken arm who'd tried to hide his pain behind jokes. Each interaction had required different parts of herself: patience, reassurance, gentle humor, but now she could simply be Emily, quiet and contemplative. She reached up to loosen her ponytail, letting her brown hair fall around her shoulders. The simple action helped release some of the tension she carried in her neck and shoulders. Working 12-hour shifts meant she was used to physical fatigue, but there was always an emotional toll as well. That's why she cherished these solitary walks home, when she could process everything in her own time, in her own way. As Emily approached the small neighborhood park, the fading sunlight created a beautiful display of orange and pink streaks across the sky. The playground equipment stood empty, silhouetted against the colorful backdrop. She smiled, remembering how she used to come here as a child, always preferring the quiet swing set to the more boisterous jungle gym where other kids played. Just as she was about to pass the park's entrance, something caught her attention. Near the curb, partially hidden by the shadow of a large oak tree, was a massive figure. Emily squinted, trying to make out more detail in the dimming light. It was a man, and he didn't look well at all. His broad shoulders were hunched forward, his head bowed low, and even from several feet away, she could see the rigidity in his posture that suggested distress. Her nursing instincts immediately kicked in, overriding her usual caution around strangers. The man's body language spoke of someone in serious medical difficulty. Without hesitation, Emily hurried toward him, her tired feet forgotten as adrenaline coursed through her system. As she got closer, she could see the sheen of sweat on his face, the labored rise and fall of his chest. The man was huge, easily over 6 feet tall, with muscular arms covered in tattoos visible beneath his leather jacket. In other circumstances, she might have been intimidated by his appearance, but right now, all she saw was someone who needed help. Emily dropped to her knees beside him, quickly reaching for the water bottle in her bag. His breathing was ragged, and his skin was hot and clammy to the touch. With gentle, practiced movements, she uncapped the bottle and began to cool his face, her other hand automatically moving to check his pulse at his neck. Emily's trained eyes took in every detail of the man before her. His face was a canvas of intricate tattoos that extended down his neck and disappeared beneath his leather jacket. The thick, dark beard couldn't hide the pallor of his skin or the way his lips had taken on a concerning bluish tinge. Under normal circumstances, she might have given such an imposing figure a wide berth, but her medical training pushed aside any hesitation. His pulse raced beneath her fingers, too fast, too weak. The heat radiating from his skin alarmed her. She recognized the signs of severe heat exhaustion, possibly verging on heat stroke. His leather jacket, while typical for motorcycle riders, had become a dangerous liability in the summer heat. "Sir, can you hear me?" Emily kept her voice calm and clear, the same tone she used with distressed patients at the hospital. When he didn't respond, she carefully began to ease the heavy jacket from his shoulders. The task wasn't easy. He was a large man, solid muscle beneath the sweat-soaked t-shirt, and mostly dead weight in his semi-conscious state. Emily's mind ran through the first aid protocols she knew by heart. Cool the patient, elevate their feet if possible, get them hydrated. She dug through her bag, pulling out the small towel she always carried, and dousing it with the remaining water from her bottle. With gentle movements, she pressed the cool cloth against his neck and face, paying special attention to his pulse points. "I'm a nurse," she explained, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. "You're experiencing heat exhaustion. I'm going to help you, but I need you to try to stay with me, okay?" His skin was marked with more than just tattoos. She noticed old scars, the kind that told stories of a hard life. The leather jacket, now folded beside him, bore patches she recognized from news reports about motorcycle gangs. But none of that mattered right now. In this moment, he was simply someone who needed her help. She continued to cool him down, monitoring his breathing and pulse. His chest rose and fell in shallow bursts, but the rhythm was becoming more regular. The cool compress seemed to be helping, and she noticed his skin beginning to lose some of its alarming heat. A low groan escaped his lips, followed by muttered words she couldn't make out. Emily leaned closer, still pressing the damp towel against his neck. His eyelids fluttered, fighting against unconsciousness. When they finally opened, she found herself staring into the most startling blue eyes she'd ever seen. Those eyes held such vulnerability, such raw emotion, that Emily felt her breath catch. They seemed at odds with his rough exterior, gentle, almost soft, filled with confusion and gratitude. A weak smile tugged at his lips, transforming his entire face. "Thank you," he managed to rasp out, his voice deep but unsteady. I'm not sure what happened." "You were overheated," Emily explained, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the strange flutter in her chest. "You need to rest and rehydrate." He shifted slightly, grimacing at the movement. "Jack," he said, then cleared his throat. "Jack Sullivan. Though most people call me Biker." There was something in the way he said it, a hint of a story behind the nickname, that made Emily wonder about the man beneath the tattoos and leather. Jack planted his palms against the sun-warmed concrete, his muscles trembling as he tried to push himself up. Emily quickly reached out to steady him, surprised by the solid weight of his shoulder under her hand. Despite his weakened state, she could feel the strength in his frame. "Easy there," she cautioned, her nurse's instincts taking over. "Take it slow. Here, drink this first." She offered him what remained of her water bottle, watching as he took careful sips. His hands were large and weathered, covered in faded tattoos that disappeared beneath his shirt sleeves. "Haven't had much chance to rest lately," Jack admitted between drinks, his voice growing stronger. "Been on the road for days now." He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, the simple movement seeming to take more effort than it should. "Guess the heat finally caught up with me." Emily nodded, noting how his color was slowly improving. "The leather jacket probably didn't help," she said gently. no judgment in her voice. "How far have you been traveling?" "Too far?" he replied with a hint of a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. There was something guarded in his expression, a careful, measured quality to his words that made Emily wonder what he wasn't saying. But it wasn't her place to pry. Jack shifted his weight, preparing to stand. Emily positioned herself at his side, ready to help, though she wasn't sure how much assistance she could offer someone of his size. To her surprise, he moved with a fluid grace despite his exhaustion, finding his feet with the practiced ease of someone used to pushing through discomfort. Still, she kept her hand hovering near his elbow until she was certain he was steady. "Are you sure you're okay to stand?" she asked, professional concern evident in her voice. "I'm good," he assured her, though he swayed slightly before finding his balance. "Thanks to you." His blue eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her want to look away, but something in them held her gaze. "I can't just let this go without doing something in return." Emily shook her head, already stepping back. "Really, it's fine. I'm a nurse. It's what I do." "Your name," he said, his voice softer than before. "At least, tell me your name." She hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Emily. Emily Waters." Jack fell silent, his expression thoughtful, as if he was wrestling with some internal debate. The quiet stretched between them, filled only by the distant sounds of traffic and the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Emily found herself studying the intricate patterns of ink on his arms, wondering about the stories behind each one. Finally, he spoke again, his words carrying a weight she didn't quite understand. "I'll see you again, Emily. I owe you?" The declaration caught her off guard, and she felt her cheeks warm slightly. "Oh, that's really not necessary," she said, trying to keep her voice light. She gave a small shrug, dismissing his words as simple politeness, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she tried to organize the patient charts at the nurse's station. The morning sun streamed through the hospital windows, but her mind kept drifting back to yesterday's encounter. Those piercing blue eyes, the tattoos that covered his arms, the way his tough exterior had cracked to reveal something softer underneath when he'd thanked her. She shook her head, trying to focus on her work. Mrs. Henderson in room 204 needed her vitals checked, and Dr. Martinez was waiting for updates on the Thompson twins. But every time she started a task, her thoughts wandered back to Jack. What kind of life must he lead? She wondered, absently clicking her pen. The leather jacket, the worn boots, the careful way he'd spoken, like someone used to weighing every word. He hadn't seemed dangerous when he was vulnerable and needed help, but there had been something about him that suggested he wasn't a stranger to trouble. "Earth to Emily!" Julie's cheerful voice cut through her thoughts. Her fellow nurse was leaning against the counter, her bright scrubs a splash of color against the sterile white walls. "That must be some daydream. You've been staring at that same chart for 5 minutes." Emily felt her cheeks flush. "Sorry, I'm just a bit distracted. Something happened on my way home yesterday." "Ooh, do tell." Julie perked up, always eager for a good story. She pulled up a chair, her eyes sparkling with interest. "Was it about that guy I saw you helping outside? The big one with all the tattoos?" Emily nodded, somehow not surprised that Julie had spotted them. Nothing escaped her friend's notice in their small town. "He had collapsed from the heat. I couldn't just leave him there." "Always the Florence Nightingale," Julie teased, but her smile faded slightly. "Wait a minute. Big guy, lots of tattoos, leather jacket?" She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Was he wearing any particular patches on that jacket?" Emily frowned, thinking back. "I think so. Some kind of emblem, maybe? I was more focused on making sure he was okay." Julie's expression turned serious, all trace of playfulness gone. "Emily, honey, please tell me you didn't get involved with Jack Sullivan." The name sent a chill down Emily's spine. "How did you—" "Everyone knows about Jack Sullivan," Julie interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's not just some random biker. He's with the Hells Angels, and not just a member, he's one of their top guys. There are rumors." She glanced around before continuing. "The FBI's been watching him. Something about a string of robberies across state lines." Emily's stomach churned. The gentle giant who'd looked at her with such gratitude, who'd spoken so softly. Could he really be the dangerous criminal Julie was describing? "I've heard stories about him," Julie continued, placing a concerned hand on Emily's arm. "Violent stories. The kind that don't make it into the papers, if you know what I mean. You need to stay away from him, Em. Whatever he said to you, whatever he promised, it's not worth getting mixed up in that world." Emily's hands had gone cold, her earlier daydreams shattered by this new reality. She remembered his parting words. "I'll see you again, Emily. I owe you." What had seemed like a kind gesture yesterday now felt ominous, heavy with implications she hadn't considered. "I was just trying to help," she whispered, more to herself than to Julie. The weight of her co-worker's warning settled over her like a heavy blanket, making it hard to breathe. Emily pushed open the door to Joe's diner, the familiar bell chiming above her head. The evening crowd was starting to thin out, leaving behind the comforting smell of coffee and apple pie. After a long shift at the hospital, this was her usual sanctuary, a place where she could decompress with a cup of coffee and maybe a slice of pie if she felt like treating herself. But tonight was different. As soon as she stepped inside, she felt it, that prickle on the back of her neck that told her something was off. Her eyes swept across the worn leather booths until they landed on a familiar figure in the corner. Jack Sullivan sat there, his broad shoulders and tattooed arms making him look too big for the small booth. Her breath caught in her throat. Julie's warnings from earlier echoed in her mind, making her pause mid-step. Jack looked up, those striking blue eyes meeting hers across the diner. He wasn't wearing his leather jacket tonight, just a plain black t-shirt that showed off his muscled arms and the intricate tattoos that covered them. Without the intimidating jacket, he looked almost normal. "Miss Waters?" he called out softly, his deep voice carrying across the quiet diner. A few other customers glanced their way, but quickly returned to their meals. Emily's hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse. She could turn around and leave. She probably should. But something in his expression, a mixture of hope and uncertainty, made her feet move forward instead. "How did you know I'd be here?" she asked, stopping at his table. Jack's lips curved into a slight smile. "Asked around. Small town. People talk." He gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Please, join me? I already ordered coffee for both of us." As if on cue, Sarah, the regular evening waitress, appeared with 2 steaming mugs. She gave Emily a curious look, but said nothing as she set them down. Emily slid into the booth, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," Jack said, his voice softer than she expected from someone his size. "What you did yesterday, most people would have walked right by, especially seeing someone like me." The honesty in his voice made her look up. Up close, she could see the small scars on his face, the slight crow's feet around his eyes that spoke of a hard life. "I'm a nurse," she said simply. "I couldn't just leave someone who needed help." Still, Jack leaned forward slightly, his presence filling the small space between them. "I owe you more than just a thank you. Let me make it up to you properly." Emily stirred her coffee, buying time to think. Everything about this situation screamed danger. The rumors, his reputation, the mysterious air that surrounded him, but there was something else too. Something in the way he looked at her with such genuine gratitude. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. "I'm not sure that's a good idea." "Just dinner," he pressed gently. "One proper meal to say thank you. That's all I'm asking for." Emily looked into those blue eyes again, seeing the same vulnerability she'd glimpsed yesterday when he'd been at his weakest. Against her better judgment, she found herself nodding. "Okay," she said quietly. "One dinner." The diner buzzed with the late afternoon crowd as Emily sat across from Jack in their now familiar corner booth. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the silver in his beard. He wrapped his large hands around his coffee mug, his knuckles marked with old scars that told stories of their own. "I enlisted when I was 18, Jack said, his voice low and steady. "Didn't have much choice, really. My old man was gone, Mom was struggling, and the military seemed like the only way out." Emily watched his face as he spoke, noting how his tough exterior seemed to soften when he talked about his past. The tattoos on his arms, which had once seemed threatening, now looked more like a diary of his life, each one marking a different chapter. "Did it help?" she asked softly. "The military?" Jack nodded slowly. "For a while. Gave me structure, purpose, made me feel like I belonged somewhere." He paused, taking a sip of coffee. "But coming home was different. Couldn't adjust. That's when I found the angels." Emily's fingers tightened around her mug. "The Hells Angels?" "Yeah." His blue eyes met hers, unflinching. They were like a brotherhood, understood what it meant to live by a code, to have each other's backs. He ran a hand through his beard. "But things changed. Or maybe I changed. Started seeing things differently." The afternoon light cast shadows across his face as he spoke about his years with the gang. Emily listened intently, hearing the regret in his voice when he talked about choices he'd made, the life he'd led. There was something genuine in the way he spoke, a raw honesty that made her want to believe in his desire for change. "I'm not proud of everything I've done," he admitted, "but I'm trying to find my way out. It's not easy, but—" He looked at her meaningfully. "Meeting you, it's made me want to try harder." Emily felt her heart flutter, but uncertainty still nagged at her. "Change isn't easy," she said carefully. "No," he agreed. "But sometimes you meet someone who makes you want to be better." The next day at work, Emily was still thinking about Jack's words when Julie cornered her in the break room. Her friend's face was tight with concern. "Emily, we need to talk," Julie said, closing the door behind her. "It's about Jack Sullivan." Emily's stomach tightened. "What about him?" "My brother works at the sheriff's office," Julie said, lowering her voice. "The FBI has been watching Jack and his gang for months. They're connected to a string of robberies across 3 states. The coffee in Emily's hand suddenly felt cold. "Are you sure?" Julie nodded grimly. "He's dangerous, Em. Whatever he's telling you, whatever reason he has for getting close to you, it's not worth the risk." She touched Emily's arm gently. "I know you want to see the good in people, but some people don't change." Emily set down her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. The Jack she'd talked to yesterday, the vulnerable man who spoke about wanting to change, who looked at her with such genuine warmth, seemed at odds with Julie's warnings. But could she trust her heart when the evidence suggested otherwise? "I'm telling you this because I care about you," Julie added softly. "Whatever he's involved in, you don't want to be caught in the middle of it." Emily stared out the break room window, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. The man she was getting to know, the one who showed her his scars and spoke of redemption, versus the dangerous criminal Julie described. The weight of the decision pressed heavy on her heart. Emily walked through the park, her footsteps heavy with uncertainty. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees. Her conversation with Julie kept replaying in her mind, each word adding to the weight in her chest. She spotted Jack from a distance, his broad figure hunched over on a wooden bench. He wasn't wearing his leather jacket today, just a plain black t-shirt that revealed the full extent of his tattoos. His hands were clasped together, and his gaze was fixed downward, lost in thought. Something about his posture made him seem less intimidating than usual, more human. As she approached, dried leaves crunched under her feet. Jack looked up, and his face brightened for a moment before he noticed her troubled expression. He straightened up, but remained seated, as if trying not to startle her. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said softly, his voice carrying a hint of relief. Emily sat down beside him, leaving a careful space between them. The wood of the bench was warm from the sun, and she could smell the familiar scent of leather and motor oil that seemed to follow Jack everywhere. "I heard some things today," she began, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "About you, about the angels." Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "I figured this was coming," he said. His hands, rough and scarred, remained clasped in front of him. "What exactly did you hear?" "That you're being investigated by the FBI," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That there were robberies across state lines." She paused, gathering her courage. "That you're dangerous." The silence that followed felt heavy. A young couple walked past them, laughing about something, their happiness a stark contrast to the tension on the bench. Jack ran a hand through his beard, a gesture Emily had come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "My past isn't pretty," he admitted. "I've done things I'm not proud of, things that keep me up at night." He turned slightly to face her, his blue eyes intense. "But meeting you, it made me realize I want something different, something better." Emily's heart raced. She could feel the sincerity in his words, see the pain in his eyes. But Julie's warnings echoed in her mind. "I want to believe you, Jack. But these aren't just rumors. The FBI doesn't investigate people for no reason." "No, they don't," he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "And I can't change what I've done. But I can try to be better. To do better." He shifted on the bench, closing some of the distance between them. "The angels. They were my family when I had nothing else. But now they're like chains, holding me back from who I want to be." Emily watched his face, searching for any sign of deception. His eyes met hers, steady and vulnerable. Then he asked the question that had been hanging between them since she arrived. "Are you afraid of me, Emily?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. She looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who had collapsed on the street that day, who had shown her kindness and vulnerability, who had shared his struggles with such raw honesty. But she also saw the tattoos, the scars, the physical reminders of his violent past. She hesitated, her heart pulling her in one direction while her mind warned her to be careful. Jack leaned forward, his voice urgent but gentle. "Please," he said. "I know I'm asking a lot, but I need you to trust me. I'm trying to get out, to leave it all behind. I just need a chance to prove it to you." Emily took a deep breath, her heart racing as she made her decision. "I'll give you a chance, Jack. But we need to take this slowly." Relief washed over Jack's face, softening his usually stern features. He stood up from the bench and gestured toward the winding path that led deeper into the park. "Would you like to walk with me?" Emily nodded, falling into step beside him. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, creating patches of golden light on the path ahead. They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the distance between them close enough to talk, but far enough to feel safe. "I've been trying to leave the Angels for months now," Jack finally said, his voice low and gravelly. "But it's not like quitting a regular job. These guys, they're like family, the kind of family that doesn't let go easily." Emily listened, watching how his shoulders tensed as he spoke. "What made you want to leave?" Jack stopped near a small pond, where ducks paddled lazily across the water. "I saw too many good people get hurt, did too many things that kept me up at night." He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the water, creating ripples that disturbed the calm surface. "After a while, you start wondering if this is all there is to life. Change isn't easy," Emily offered softly, "but it's never too late to start over." Jack turned to look at her, his blue eyes intense. "That's what I felt when I met you. Like maybe there was still a chance for something different." He ran a hand through his beard, a gesture Emily was beginning to recognize as nervousness. "The guys in the club, they don't understand. They think I'm going soft." They continued walking, their pace slow and measured. Emily noticed how Jack kept scanning their surroundings, a habit she assumed came from years of watching his back. "Are you in danger?" she asked. "Not exactly," he said, but his expression suggested otherwise. "They're my brothers, but they're also businessmen. They won't let me walk away without making sure I won't cause trouble." The path led them back toward the park entrance, where the streetlights were starting to flicker on in the dimming light. Jack stopped and turned to Emily, his expression serious but hopeful. "There's this small Italian place on Oak Street," he said. "Real quiet, good food. Would you have dinner with me there tomorrow night? I'd like to talk more about everything, about what I want for the future." Emily studied his face, noting the sincerity in his eyes, the way he held himself, slightly uncertain, as if preparing for rejection. Despite all her reservations, she felt drawn to his vulnerability, his desire for change. "I'd like that," she found herself saying. A genuine smile spread across Jack's face, transforming his features. "I'll pick you up at 7. "I'll meet you there," Emily replied, maintaining her cautious approach. Jack nodded, understanding. "That's fair." As they parted ways, Emily felt a mix of emotions washing over her. There was something about Jack that made her feel safe, despite everything she knew about his past. His honesty about his struggles, his desire to change. It all seemed genuine. Yet a small voice in the back of her mind kept whispering warnings, reminding her of everything she'd heard about the Hells Angels and their world of violence and crime. Walking home, she wondered if she was making a huge mistake or taking the first step toward something meaningful. Tomorrow's dinner would perhaps give her the answers she needed. Emily found herself looking forward to her evening talks with Jack. Over the past few weeks, they'd fallen into a comfortable routine of meeting at the small diner on 3rd Street, where the waitress, Betty, now knew their usual orders by heart. Tonight, they sat in their regular booth, empty coffee cups between them. The diner's neon sign cast a soft pink glow through the window, making Jack's features seem softer than usual. His leather jacket was draped over the back of his seat, and in his plain black t-shirt, the tattoos on his arms were clearly visible, intricate designs that Emily had slowly learned the stories behind. "My mom used to say I was too sensitive for my own good," Emily said, continuing their conversation about childhood memories. "I'd cry if I saw a hurt animal, or if someone at school was being bullied." Jack's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "That sensitivity is what makes you such a good nurse. It's not a weakness, Emily. It's your strength." She felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. These quiet moments with Jack had become precious to her. He listened, really listened, when she spoke, and shared parts of himself that she sensed few others got to see. "It's getting late," Jack said, glancing at his watch. Let me drive you home." Outside, the night air was cool and crisp. Jack's motorcycle gleamed under the streetlights, but he led her to a modest pickup truck instead. "Borrowed it from a friend," he explained. "Thought you might be more comfortable." The thoughtful gesture made Emily smile. It was these little things, the way he remembered how she took her coffee, how he always made sure to sit where he could see the door. An old habit, he'd explained, and now this, that showed her who he really was beneath the tough exterior. During the drive, they fell into comfortable silence. Emily watched the familiar streets of their small town pass by, streets that somehow looked different with Jack beside her. The radio played softly in the background, some old country song about second chances. When they reached her apartment building, Jack turned off the engine but made no move to get out. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low and serious, "about what you said last week, about trust being earned." Emily turned to face him, noting how the streetlight caught the silver in his beard. "Yes?" "I want to earn it, Emily. Your trust. I know my past makes things complicated, but—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in that nervous gesture she'd come to recognize. The moment felt charged with possibility. Emily could feel her heart beating faster as Jack shifted closer. His eyes searched her face, asking permission without words. When she didn't pull away, he leaned in slowly, giving her plenty of time to stop him. The kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, so different from what anyone might expect from a man like Jack. His beard was soft against her skin, and she could smell the familiar scent of leather and coffee that always seemed to surround him. For a moment, Emily let herself melt into the kiss, feeling the spark of connection that had been building between them for weeks. But then reality crashed back in. Thoughts of his past, of the dangers that might come with letting him fully into her life, made her pull away. Her heart was racing, torn between what she felt and what she feared. "I'm sorry," she whispered, not meeting his eyes. I need more time." Emily's hands trembled as she poured coffee into a patient's cup. The elderly woman smiled up at her, but Emily could barely manage a weak smile in return. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying the conversation she'd overheard in the hospital break room earlier that morning. "I saw him behind Murphy's bar last night," one of the nurses had whispered. "With those other bikers. They were passing something between them. Looked like money, lots of it." "Jack Sullivan's bad news," another had added. "My brother's a cop, and he says the whole gang's under investigation. Armed robbery, they think." Emily had quietly slipped out of the break room, her stomach in knots. She'd been hearing more whispers lately, each one worse than the last. Some said Jack was involved in drug trafficking. Others claimed he was the mastermind behind a string of violent robberies across 3 counties. During her lunch break, Emily sat alone in the hospital courtyard, picking at her sandwich. A group of paramedics walked by, their conversation drifting over. "Yeah, that's the one. Leather jacket, full beard, total thug," one said. "Was there when they roughed up that store owner on 5th Street last month?" Emily's appetite vanished. She'd been with Jack that night. They'd gotten ice cream and walked in the park. He couldn't have been involved. Could he? Later that afternoon, Julie caught up with her in the hallway. "Em, we need to talk." Her friend's face was serious. "My cousin works at the gas station near the highway. Says Jack and his gang were there yesterday, acting suspicious. There was a robbery at the jewelry store 2 blocks over that same afternoon." "You don't know it was him," Emily defended weakly, but doubt gnawed at her insides. "I'm just saying be careful." Julie squeezed her arm. "Where there's smoke." By the time her shift ended, Emily's head was spinning. She thought about the gentle way Jack had kissed her, how his eyes softened when he talked about wanting to change. But what if it was all an act? What if everyone else saw the truth and she was just being naive? At home, Emily paced her small apartment, unable to settle. The sun had set, casting long shadows across her living room. She jumped at every sound from the street below, her nerves frayed from the day's worth of rumors and warnings. A sharp knock at her door made her heart leap into her throat. Through the peephole, she saw Jack standing there, looking nothing like the confident man she knew. His face was drawn, his usual steady stance replaced by nervous energy. Emily opened the door cautiously. "Jack?" He stepped inside quickly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Emily, I need your help." His voice was rough, desperate. "The police. They think I was involved in the Carter's jewelry heist. They're closing in, asking questions." "Were you?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Jack's eyes met hers, filled with pain and something else she couldn't quite read. "Please, Emily, I don't have anyone else to turn to. They're watching my place, and I need somewhere to think, to figure this out." Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding. The man before her looked lost, scared even, so different from the dangerous criminal everyone described. But as she stared at him, all the whispers and warnings from throughout the day echoed in her mind, making her question everything she thought she knew about Jack Sullivan. Emily sat at her kitchen table the next morning, stirring her untouched coffee. The events of last night still weighed heavily on her mind. She had let Jack stay on her couch, but by morning he was gone, leaving only a hastily scribbled "thank you" note behind. Her phone buzzed, displaying her mother's number. Emily's stomach tightened as she answered. "Hi, Mom." "Emily, honey?" Her mother's voice trembled. "Is it true? Are you seeing that Sullivan man?" Emily closed her eyes, pressing her fingers against her temple. "Mom, how did you—" "Mrs. Peterson saw you with him at the diner." Her mother's words tumbled out in a rush. "Do you have any idea who he is? What he's involved in?" "It's not what you think," Emily started, but her mother cut her off. "Your father and I are worried sick. That man is dangerous, Emily. Everyone knows about the Hells Angels and what they do." Her mother's voice cracked. "Remember Cousin Sarah? How she got mixed up with that crowd? We nearly lost her." Emily's throat tightened. She did remember Sarah, the family black sheep who'd spent 3 years in an abusive relationship with a gang member. "This is different, Mom. Jack is trying to change." "That's what they all say, sweetheart." Her father's voice came on the line now. He must have been listening on the extension. "Men like that don't change. They just drag good people down with them." "Dad, please." "We raised you better than this," her father continued, his voice stern but concerned. "You're a nurse, Emily. You help people. Don't throw your life away on someone who could destroy everything you've worked for." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I know you're worried, but promise us you'll stay away from him," her mother pleaded. "Please, Emily. We couldn't bear it if something happened to you." The conversation left Emily feeling drained. At work, she went through the motions, checking vitals and administering medications, but her mind was elsewhere. Her parents' words echoed in her head, mixing with all the rumors and warnings she'd been hearing. Around mid-afternoon, Emily was updating patient charts at the nurse's station when a hush fell over the hallway. She looked up to see Jack striding toward her, his leather jacket and tattooed appearance stark against the sterile hospital walls. Several patients and staff members quickly moved out of his way. Emily's heart raced as she noticed something different about him. His usual warmth was gone, replaced by a hardened expression she'd never seen before. His jaw was set, and his eyes held a dangerous glint that made her understand why people feared him. "We need to talk," he said quietly, but his voice carried an edge that made her shiver. They stepped into an empty break room. Jack stood by the window, keeping his distance from her. "I'm sorry, Emily. I never should have brought you into this. Jack, what's going on? He turned to face her, and for a moment she saw pain flash across his features. I thought I could leave it all behind, start fresh. But my past, it's not letting go. He ran a hand through his hair. The cops are circling. The gang's getting nervous. It's only a matter of time before things get ugly. Let me help you, Emily whispered, taking a step toward him. Jack backed away. That's exactly what I can't let happen. You're good, Emily. Pure. I won't be the one who ruins that. His voice grew firmer. I'm leaving town. Don't try to find me. Don't ask about me. Just forget we ever met. Emily felt her world crumbling. Please don't do this. I have to. Jack's eyes softened for just a moment. Stay safe, Emily. Stay far away from men like me. The late summer sun filtered through the hospital windows, casting long shadows across Emily's workspace. 3 weeks had passed since Jack's departure, but the hollow feeling in her chest hadn't diminished. She mechanically checked the IV drip of her elderly patient, Mrs. Henderson, who watched her with knowing eyes. You seem far away today, dear, Mrs. Henderson said softly. Emily managed a small smile. Just tired, that's all. But it wasn't just fatigue. Every day felt like she was walking through fog, going through the motions without really being present. The hospital corridors that once felt like home now seemed empty and cold. Even her favorite coffee shop, where she'd spent countless hours talking with Jack, had lost its warmth. During her lunch break, Emily sat alone in the hospital garden, picking at her sandwich. A motorcycle roared past on the nearby street, and her head snapped up, heart racing. But it wasn't him. It was never him. She'd done this dozens of times now, responding to every leather jacket, every motorcycle sound, every glimpse of a bearded man in the distance. Her mother called daily, relieved that Jack was gone. You did the right thing, honey, she'd say. But it didn't feel right. Nothing felt right anymore. At home, Emily tried to keep busy. She reorganized her closet, deep-cleaned the kitchen, and caught up on her reading. But every book reminded her of the stories Jack had shared about his life, the way his eyes would crinkle when he smiled, how his rough exterior would soften when he talked about his dreams of a different life. One evening, while sorting through her phone photos, she found a picture Julie had taken of her and Jack at the diner. They weren't even looking at the camera. Jack was mid-sentence, his hands gesturing as he told a story, and Emily was laughing, truly laughing, in a way she hadn't done since he left. The nights were the hardest. Emily would lie awake, staring at her ceiling, remembering their conversations. The way Jack had opened up about his struggles, his desire to change, his fears about his past catching up with him. She understood now why he'd left, to protect her. But understanding didn't make it hurt any less. In her dreams, Jack was always there. Sometimes they were back at the park bench where they'd first really talked. Other times, they were at the diner, sharing coffee and quiet conversations. The dreams felt so real that waking up was like losing him all over again. She missed the little things most, the way he'd pull out her chair at the diner, how he'd text her random thoughts throughout the day, the gentle way he'd touch her hand when she was worried. For someone who appeared so rough to the world, he'd shown her such tenderness. Even at work, where she'd always found purpose and fulfillment, Emily felt disconnected. Her patients noticed the change in her. The usually attentive nurse now seemed lost in thought, though she still provided excellent care. Julie had stopped mentioning Jack's name, but Emily caught her worried glances. At night, Emily would sit by her window, watching the street below. The same street where she'd first found Jack, collapsed and vulnerable. She'd touch her lips, remembering their kiss, the way time had seemed to stop in that moment. Despite everything, The warnings, the danger, her family's fears. She couldn't regret knowing him. Jack had awakened something in her that she hadn't known was sleeping. And now that he was gone, that part of her felt hollow and aching. Emily sat curled on her couch, absently flipping through a medical journal she couldn't focus on. The television droned quietly in the background, more for company than entertainment. Her phone lay silent on the coffee table, just as it had been for weeks since Jack disappeared from her life. The sudden vibration of her phone made her jump. An unknown number flashed across the screen. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she answered. "Emily?" Jack's voice was strained, barely above a whisper. I need help." She sat up straight, clutching the phone tighter. "Jack? What's wrong?" "I'm sorry," he managed between labored breaths. "I wouldn't call if I had another choice." There was a pause, filled with the sound of his ragged breathing. "I'm hurt pretty bad." Emily was already on her feet, grabbing her keys and medical bag. "Where are you?" He gave her an address, an industrial area on the outskirts of town. Her hands trembled as she scribbled it down on a scrap of paper. "Stay awake, Jack. I'm coming." She rushed down to her car, her nurse's instincts taking over despite the fear coursing through her veins. The streets were nearly empty at this hour. Emily's headlights cut through the darkness as she drove, her mind racing with possibilities. What kind of trouble was he in? How badly was he hurt? She pressed harder on the accelerator, watching the speedometer climb. The industrial district was a maze of warehouses and abandoned buildings. Emily's car headlights swept across faded signs and chain-link fences until she found the address, an old auto repair shop with boarded-up windows. "Jack?" she called out softly as she got out of her car, medical bag in hand. "Over here." His voice came from behind a stack of old tires. Emily rushed over, her breath catching in her throat when she saw him. Jack was slumped against the wall, his face bruised and bloodied. His leather jacket was torn, and he held his right side protectively. "Oh, Jack," she whispered, kneeling beside him. Her trained eyes quickly assessed his injuries: multiple contusions, a split lip, possibly bruised ribs. "They found me," he said through gritted teeth. "Rival gang. Thought I was moving in on their territory." He winced as Emily gently touched his face. "I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't know who else to call." Emily pulled out her penlight, checking his pupils. "Can you stand?" He nodded, though his face was pale beneath the bruises. Emily wrapped her arm around his waist, helping him to his feet. He leaned heavily against her, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "My apartment isn't far," she said, leading him slowly toward her car. "I can treat you there." Jack tried to protest. "Emily, you shouldn't get involved." "Stop," she cut him off firmly, helping him into the passenger seat. "You called me because you needed help. Let me help you." The drive to her apartment was silent except for Jack's labored breathing. Emily kept glancing at him, noting how he tried to hide his pain, how his hands were still trembling slightly. Despite everything, the warnings, the danger, her own fears, she couldn't leave him alone and hurt. She parked in her building's underground garage and helped Jack out of the car. Together they made their slow way to the elevator, his arm around her shoulders, her arm steady around his waist. Emily could feel his heart racing beneath her touch, whether from pain or fear or both, she wasn't sure. In Emily's small apartment bathroom, the harsh fluorescent light revealed every cut and bruise on Jack's face. She worked methodically, cleaning his wounds with gentle hands while he sat on the closed toilet lid. The first aid kit lay open on the counter, gauze and antiseptic spread out beside it. Jack winced as she dabbed at a particularly deep cut above his eyebrow. "I deserve worse than this," he muttered, his voice rough with emotion. Emily paused, cotton swab hovering in mid-air. What do you mean? He closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging. The things I've done, Emily. The people I've hurt. Sometimes I can't sleep at night thinking about it. His hands clenched into fists on his knees. I joined the Angels thinking I'd found a brotherhood, you know? After the military, I was lost. They gave me purpose, but that purpose... He trailed off, shaking his head. Emily resumed cleaning his wounds, letting him talk. Her touch remained steady, even as her heart ached at his words. I've tried to leave, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 times now, but they always pull me back in. There's always one more job, one more favor I owe. And the guilt... He looked up at her, his blue eyes swimming with unshed tears. The guilt follows me everywhere. Emily set down the cotton swab and knelt in front of him, taking his rough hands in hers. Jack, you don't have to live like this. I don't know how to be anyone else anymore, he admitted. His fingers tightened around hers. But when I'm with you, I remember who I used to be, who I want to be. Emily stood up, turning away to hide the tears in her own eyes. She busied herself with the first aid supplies, trying to gather her thoughts. The weight of their situation pressed down on her, the danger, the uncertainty, the constant fear. I can't keep doing this, Jack, she finally said, her voice trembling. She turned back to face him. I love you. God help me, I do. But I can't live like this, wondering if each phone call will be about you being hurt or... She couldn't finish the sentence. Jack stood up slowly, grimacing at the pain in his ribs. He reached for her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Emily, I love you too, and you deserve better than this life. Better than me. That's not what I'm saying. She looked up at him, her eyes fierce despite her tears. I don't want better than you. I want you, but I need you to be safe. I need to know that every time you walk out that door, you're coming back. Jack pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. I'm done, he whispered. For real this time. No more jobs, no more favors. I'll find a way out, whatever it takes. Do you mean it? Emily searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt. I've never meant anything more in my life. His voice was steady, certain. I choose you, Emily. I choose a life with you, away from all of this. I promise. Emily wrapped her arms around him carefully, mindful of his injuries. She wanted to believe him with all her heart, but she knew promises were easier made than kept. Still, as she held him, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek, she chose to trust in the love she saw in his eyes. The pounding on Jack's apartment door echoed like thunder through the small space. Emily's heart leaped into her throat as she saw Jack's face turn pale. He knew who it was before they even spoke. Sullivan, open up! A gruff voice called from the hallway. More fists joined the first, making the door rattle in its frame. Jack grabbed Emily's arm gently but firmly. Get in the bedroom, he whispered urgently. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe. Emily hesitated for a moment, her fingers clutching his shirt. Jack. Please, he said, his blue eyes intense. I won't let them hurt you. She nodded and hurried to the bedroom, closing the door as quietly as possible. Her hands shook as she turned the lock. Through the thin walls, she could hear everything. The front door opened with a creak. Heavy boots stomped into the apartment, accompanied by the rustle of leather jackets and the jingle of chains. Well, well, a deep voice drawled. Heard some interesting rumors about you, Sullivan. Something about you going soft, thinking of leaving the family? It's not a rumor, Derek. Jack's voice was steady, controlled. I'm done. Laughter filled the room, but it wasn't the friendly kind. Emily pressed her back against the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor. Her heart hammered in her chest. "Nobody's done with the angels," another voice spat. "You know better than that." "Things change," Jack replied. "I'm changing." Something crashed, probably a lamp or a vase. Emily jumped, covering her mouth to stifle a gasp. "This about that nurse?" Derek's voice turned menacing. "That pretty little thing we've seen you with? What, you think you can play house with her? Pretend you're normal?" "Leave her out of this." Jack's voice carried a dangerous edge Emily had never heard before. More laughter, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps moving around the apartment. "You've gone soft, Sullivan. Real soft. What happened to the guy who used to break kneecaps without blinking?" "He grew a conscience," Jack said firmly. "I'm not that person anymore. I won't be part of the violence, the crime. I'm done with all of it." A tense silence followed. Emily held her breath, straining to hear what was happening. "You know what happens to people who try to leave," Derek said quietly. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. "Yeah, I do," Jack replied. "And I don't care. You can threaten me all you want, but I'm not changing my mind. I'm out." The silence stretched longer this time. Emily could almost feel the tension seeping through the walls. Finally, Derek spoke again. "You're making a big mistake, Sullivan. A real big mistake." "The only mistake I made was staying as long as I did." Jack's voice was firm, resolute. "Now get out of my apartment." There was a scuffling of boots, muttered curses, and the sound of several people moving toward the door. Emily's heart was still racing, but a different kind of tension filled her now. Hope mixed with fear. "This isn't over," Derek called out. The door slammed shut, making the walls shake. Emily waited, counting her breaths until she heard Jack's gentle knock on the bedroom door. "It's safe now," he said softly. She unlocked the door with trembling fingers. Jack stood there, looking tired but determined. Their eyes met, and in that moment Emily knew, really knew, that he had chosen her, chosen a different life, no matter the consequences. Emily sat on Jack's worn leather couch, her fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows, casting long shadows across the apartment's bare walls. Jack paced back and forth, his heavy boots making soft thuds against the carpet. "I've been thinking about this for a while," Jack said, running a hand through his beard. He stopped pacing and looked at Emily, his blue eyes clear and focused. "I can't keep living like this, always looking over my shoulder, always wondering when the next fight will break out." Emily watched him carefully, noting how different he seemed from the man she'd first met. The tough exterior was still there, but there was something softer now, more vulnerable. "I've got some money saved up," he continued, sitting down beside her. "Clean money," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "From my military pension, enough to start over somewhere new." Emily set her tea down on the coffee table. "Where would you go?" "I was thinking about Montana," Jack said, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "Got a buddy from the service who runs a ranch up there. Says he could use someone with my skills. Mechanical work, security, that kind of thing. It's honest work, Emily. Real work." His voice grew more animated as he spoke, and Emily could hear the hope in it. She'd never seen him this way before, like a weight was lifting from his shoulders. "I've already started the process," he continued. "Been talking to a lawyer about making it official with the Angels. There are ways to leave, proper channels. It's not easy, but it's possible." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I want you to know I'm serious about this." Emily felt her heart flutter. Part of her wanted to believe him completely, to throw caution to the wind and embrace this new future he was describing. But the practical nurse in her, the one who'd seen too many broken promises in the ER, held back. What about the others? She asked softly. After what happened yesterday, Jack squeezed her hand. That's why I need to do this right. Follow the proper channels. Show them I'm not a threat, just a man who wants out. It'll take time, but it's the only way. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. Emily opened it to find a printed email from someone named Mike Thompson, describing a job opening at the Double T Ranch in Montana. It's real, Jack said quietly. All of it. The job, the fresh start, everything. He paused, his voice growing softer. I just need to know if you believe in me enough to give it a chance. Emily looked at the email, then at Jack's hopeful face. The man before her was so different from the intimidating figure she'd helped that hot afternoon. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the determination in his jaw. Her heart swelled with competing emotions. Hope for the future he described, fear that it might all fall apart. She wanted to believe in him, in this dream of a fresh start. But trust was a delicate thing, especially with so much at stake. After a long moment, she squeezed his hand back. I want to believe in this, she said carefully. In you. But we need to take it one step at a time. The counselor's office was painted in soft blues and greens, with comfortable chairs and gentle lighting. Jack sat rigidly in one of them, his large frame making the furniture seem smaller than it was. Emily waited outside in the reception area, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, proud of him for taking this step. When Jack emerged an hour later, his eyes were red-rimmed but clear. Emily stood up, gathering her purse, and walked with him to the parking lot. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement. That was different, Jack said, his voice gruff but steady. Never thought I'd find myself talking to someone about all this stuff. Emily reached for his hand, her smaller fingers intertwining with his. How do you feel? Like I just went 10 rounds in the ring, he admitted, managing a small smile. But maybe in a good way? Doc says it's normal, dealing with all this old stuff coming up. They walked to Emily's car, where Jack leaned against the hood, taking deep breaths of the fresh air. The hardest part was talking about the gang, he continued. All those years thinking they were my family. The doc helped me see how they used that, you know? Used my need to belong. Emily nodded, remembering her own fears about Jack's connections to the Hells Angels. Now, watching him work so hard to break free, she felt a surge of pride. I met with the lawyer yesterday, Jack said, pulling out his phone. Got everything documented. My intention to leave, the proper procedures, even got some of the senior members to sign off on it. He showed her the legal documents, his hands slightly shaking. It's happening, Emily. Really happening. Emily looked at the papers, noting the official letterhead and signatures. It felt surreal, seeing such a dangerous part of life reduced to formal documentation. Later that evening, they walked through Town Square Park. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and the evening air was cool and fresh. Children played on the swings while their parents watched from nearby benches. It was such a normal scene, so peaceful. I never thought I could have this, Jack said softly, gesturing to the families around them. Always figured I was too far gone. Emily squeezed his hand. You're not gone at all. You're right here. They stopped by the small pond, watching ducks glide across the water. Jack pulled Emily closer, and she rested her head against his shoulder. The gesture felt natural now, comfortable. She remembered how nervous she'd been around him at first, how her heart had raced with fear rather than affection. Thank you, she said suddenly. Jack looked down at her, surprised. For what? For showing me that people can change. That trust isn't always a mistake. Emily smiled, feeling the truth of her words. I was so careful with my heart before, always keeping everyone at arm's length. But watching you face your past, work to change, it's helped me too." Jack's arm tightened around her shoulders, and they stood there in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the park. The peaceful evening wrapped around them like a warm blanket, a stark contrast to the turbulent world they were leaving behind. The phone call came just as Emily was setting the table for dinner. Jack stood by the window of her small apartment, his broad shoulders tense as he listened. Emily could tell from his expression that something was wrong. "Yes, sir, I understand," Jack said, his voice low and controlled. "I'll need time to think about it." He ended the call and stared out the window for a long moment, his reflection grim against the darkening sky. "What is it?" Emily asked, setting down the plate she was holding. The cheerful floral pattern seemed out of place with the sudden tension in the room. Jack turned to face her, running a hand through his beard, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of stress. "That was Detective Morrison. They're building a case against some of the gang's major operations. Drug trafficking, mostly." He walked to the kitchen table and sank into a chair. "They want my help, want me to testify about what I know." Emily's heart seemed to skip a beat. She sat down across from him, the pasta she'd made cooling forgotten on the counter. "What kind of help?" "Names, dates, places." Jack's fingers drummed against the wooden table. "I know enough to help them make their case stick. Things I saw, conversations I heard." He looked down at his hands, at the faded tattoos that marked his knuckles. "They're offering witness protection, if needed." The words "witness protection" made Emily's stomach clench. She reached across the table and took his hand. "That sounds dangerous, Jack." "It is." He squeezed her fingers gently. "But maybe it's also my chance to make things right. All those years I spent looking the other way, telling myself it wasn't my problem." He trailed off, shaking his head. Emily watched his face, seeing the conflict there. The man she'd first met, the intimidating biker with danger written all over him, seemed very far away from the person sitting across from her now. But she could still see traces of that old life in the shadows under his eyes, in the way he carried the weight of his past. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. Jack met her gaze. "I'm thinking about all the kids who get caught up in this life because they don't know any better, like I did. About all the families torn apart by the drugs the gang moves through town." He straightened in his chair. "I could help stop that." Emily felt tears prick at her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted. "These people, they're dangerous. If they find out you're helping the police—" "Hey," Jack said, standing up and moving around the table to kneel beside her chair. "Look at me." He took both her hands in his. "I know it's scary, but I need to do this. Not just for me, but for us, for our future." His blue eyes were steady, determined. "I can't build a new life while carrying all this guilt. And maybe this is how I finally make peace with my past." Emily touched his face, feeling the rough texture of his beard under her fingers. "Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." He turned his head to kiss her palm. "The detective said they'll take every precaution. And this time I'm not doing it alone. I've got something worth protecting now." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Emily looked at Jack, really looked at him, and saw not just the man she'd fallen in love with, but also the man he was becoming. Someone brave enough to face his past, someone strong enough to try to make things right. "Okay," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "We'll face this together." The morning sun filtered through Emily's kitchen window as she watched Jack pack a small duffel bag. His movements were methodical, practiced, remnants of his military training showing through. The coffee pot gurgled in the background, filling the tense silence with its familiar sound. Detective Morrison said it might take a few weeks, Jack said, folding a worn t-shirt. His voice was steady, but Emily could see the slight tremor in his hands. Maybe longer, depending on how the investigation goes. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, leaning against the doorframe. "And you're sure about this?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. She'd seen the determination in his eyes when he'd called the detective back last night. Jack paused, looking up at her. The morning light caught the silver strands in his beard, making him look older, more weathered. "I've been running from my past for too long, Em. Every time I try to leave it behind, it finds a way to pull me back in." He zipped the bag closed with a final, decisive motion. "This is the only way to end it for good." Emily crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed beside his bag. "Tell me what happens next." "They're setting me up in a safe house across state lines." Jack sat next to her, the mattress dipping under his weight. "I'll work with their team, go through everything I know about the gang's operations. Names, dates, locations, everything that can help build their case." "And after that?" "Witness protection." The words hung heavy in the air. New name, new location, new start. He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I know it's not fair to ask you to wait." "Don't," Emily interrupted, squeezing his hand. "We both knew this wouldn't be easy when we started." She managed a small smile, though her heart felt like it was being squeezed in her chest. "I'm proud of you. You know that?" Jack's eyes softened, and he pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I couldn't have done this without you, Em. Before I met you, I didn't think I deserved another chance. Didn't think I could ever be anything more than what the gang made me." Emily leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of his leather jacket mixed with the soap she kept in her bathroom. "You were always more than that. You just needed to believe it yourself." A knock at the door made them both jump. Detective Morrison's voice called through. "Sullivan, it's time." Jack stood, shouldering his bag. Emily rose with him, her nurse's instincts kicking in as she straightened his jacket and checked that he had everything he needed. It was easier to focus on these small tasks than to think about what came next. "The detective has my number," she said, her voice only slightly shaky. "If you need anything, if you're hurt or sick, you make them call me, okay?" "I will." Jack cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "This isn't goodbye, Emily. It's just, see you later." Emily nodded, unable to speak. Jack kissed her forehead, then her lips, soft and quick. Another knock at the door, more urgent this time. "I have to go," he whispered against her hair. Emily stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself again. She watched as Jack walked to the door, his shoulders straight and head held high. Just before he opened it, he turned back to look at her one last time. In that moment, she saw not the dangerous biker who had collapsed on the street all those months ago, but a man who had found the courage to change, to face his demons, to do what was right no matter the cost. The morning sun cast long shadows across Emily's front porch as she watched Detective Morrison load Jack's duffel bag into the unmarked police car. Her hands trembled slightly, and she clasped them together to steady herself. Jack stood beside her, his presence both comforting and heartbreaking. "I'll come back for you," Jack said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "Once this is all over, once they've taken down the gang, I'll find my way back to you." Emily nodded, trying to keep her composure. "I know you will." She managed a small smile, though her heart felt like it was breaking. "You're not just running away anymore. You're doing the right thing." Jack reached out and took her hand, his grip firm and warm. The tattoos on his knuckles, once so intimidating to her, now felt familiar and dear. You taught me what that means, Em. Doing the right thing. He paused, swallowing hard. Before you, I didn't think I deserved a second chance. Detective Morrison cleared his throat from beside the car. 5 minutes, Sullivan. Emily stepped closer to Jack, breathing in his scent one last time. Leather and soap and something uniquely him. Promise me you'll be careful, she whispered. Promise me you won't try to be a hero. I promise. Jack's blue eyes met hers, full of determination and love. I'm done with that life. Everything I do now, I do for us, for our future. Emily reached up and touched his face, her fingers trailing along his beard. I'll wait for you, however long it takes. Jack pulled her into his arms then, holding her tight against his chest. Emily could feel his heart beating, strong and steady, just like it had been that first day when she'd found him collapsed on the street. How different things were now, how much they'd both changed. I love you, he murmured into her hair. Remember that, okay? No matter what happens, no matter how long it takes, I love you. Emily's voice cracked as she replied, I love you too. They stayed like that for a moment longer, until Detective Morrison approached. It's time, Sullivan. We need to move. Jack pulled back slowly, his hands lingering on Emily's shoulders. You've got my burner phone number? When she nodded, he continued. Use it if you need to, but only in an emergency. I'll try to check in when I can, but... I know, Emily said. Stay safe. That's all that matters. Jack kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they parted, Emily could see the tears in his eyes matching her own. He brushed his thumb across her cheek, wiping away a tear. See you later, Em, he said, managing a small smile, the same smile that had first shown her the gentle heart beneath his tough exterior. See you later, she echoed. Emily watched as Jack walked to the car, his steps measured and determined. He got into the passenger seat, and through the windshield, their eyes met one last time. He raised his hand in a final goodbye as Detective Morrison started the engine. As the car pulled away from the curb, Emily felt the tears she'd been holding back begin to fall freely. She wrapped her arms around herself, watching until the car turned the corner and disappeared from sight. The uncertainty of their future pressed heavy on her heart, but beneath it all, hope flickered like a steady flame. Jack would come back to her. She had to believe that. Emily sat at her usual corner table in the diner, staring into her coffee cup. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm patterns across the worn Formica table. 6 months had passed since Jack left. 6 months of worrying, waiting, and hoping. The bell above the door chimed, but Emily didn't look up. She'd stopped expecting him in every stranger who walked through doors. Her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, lost in thought. Is this seat taken? That voice, her heart stopped. Emily's hands froze on her cup as she slowly raised her head. There he stood. Jack Sullivan, but different somehow. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his hair was shorter, styled professionally. He wore a plain blue button-down shirt instead of his usual leather jacket. The tattoos on his hands were still visible, but they seemed less prominent now, like relics from another life. Jack, she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. He smiled, that same gentle smile that had always been just for her. Actually, it's James Cooper now. He gestured to the empty seat across from her. Mind if I join you? Emily nodded, unable to find words. She watched as he slid into the booth, his movements still carrying that familiar grace despite his new appearance. Up close, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the slight tension in his jaw, but his blue eyes were clear and steady. "You look," Emily started, then faltered. "Different?" He ran a hand through his shorter hair self-consciously. "Witness protection has its own dress code, apparently." "Good," she finished. "You look good." The waitress approached with a fresh pot of coffee, and James now, Emily reminded herself, ordered a cup. They sat in silence until she left, both drinking in the sight of each other. "It's over," he said finally, his voice low and intense. "The FBI got everything they needed. The gang's leadership is behind bars, and the rest have scattered. I'm free, Em." Emily's hands trembled as she set down her cup. "Really? You're really free?" He reached across the table, his hands enveloping hers. His touch was exactly as she remembered, warm, strong, gentle. "Really. I've got a new identity, a clean slate. I'm working as a youth counselor now, if you can believe it, using my experience to help kids stay out of gangs." Tears pricked at Emily's eyes. "That's perfect for you." "I've got an apartment in the next town over," he continued. "It's small, but it's honest. Everything I own now, everything I am, it's all legitimate. No more looking over my shoulder, no more violence, no more fear." Emily squeezed his hands. "I knew you could do it. I never doubted you. You're the only one who ever believed in me like that." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I thought about you every day, every single day." "I missed you so much," Emily admitted, her voice catching. "I'm here now," he said softly. "And I'm not going anywhere. If you'll have me, that is. I know it's been a long time, and I know I'm technically a different person now." "You're still you," Emily interrupted. "James Cooper or Jack Sullivan, you're still the man I fell in love with." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then let's start over. No more dangerous pasts, no more looking over our shoulders. Just us, building something real together." Emily looked at their joined hands, at this man who had fought so hard to change his life, and felt her heart swell with hope. This was their chance, their real beginning. The small house needed work, but Emily loved it immediately. White paint peeled from the window frames, and the porch steps creaked, but sunlight streamed through every window. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Jack, now going by James to most people, carried the last box through the front door, his t-shirt damp with sweat from moving furniture all morning. Emily watched him from the kitchen as she unpacked dishes, still amazed by how different he looked in regular work clothes, instead of his old leather jacket. "That's the last of it," he said, setting the box down carefully. "Who knew you had so many books?" Emily laughed, placing plates in the cupboard. "Says the man with 3 boxes of tools." "Hey, those are essential for the job." He crossed the kitchen and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Speaking of which, I start at Anderson Construction on Monday." "Are you nervous?" Emily turned in his arms to face him. "A little," he admitted. "It's been a while since I've had a normal job, but Mike Anderson seems like a good boss, and the crew doesn't ask too many questions." Emily reached up and smoothed a wrinkle from his shirt. "You'll do great. You've always been good with your hands." Their first few weeks settled into a comfortable routine. Emily worked her usual shifts at the hospital, while James to his co-workers, quickly proved himself valuable at the construction company. He came home tired but satisfied, proud to be earning an honest living. One evening, Emily arrived home to find Jack on a ladder, replacing the old porch light. Tools were scattered across the steps, and a fresh coat of white paint brightened the window frames. "What's all this?" she called up to him. He glanced down, grinning. "Just fixing up our home. Thought it could use some TLC?" "Our home," Emily repeated softly, loving how those words sounded. The neighborhood welcomed them warmly. Was Peterson next door brought over a casserole their first week, and Mr. Chen from across the street shared vegetables from his garden. If anyone recognized Jack from his previous life, they never mentioned it. Jack threw himself into home improvements with the same intensity he once devoted to his old life. He replaced rotting boards on the porch, fixed leaky faucets, and painted every room. Emily would often find him in the backyard, planning a garden or sketching ideas for a deck. "I never thought I'd have this," he confided one evening as they cooked dinner together. "A real home, honest work, neighbors who wave good morning." Emily stirred the pasta sauce, remembering the man she'd found collapsed on the street that day. "You've come so far." "Because of you," he said, chopping vegetables with the precision he'd learned in his new life. "You saw something in me worth saving." "You saved yourself," Emily corrected gently. "I just believed in you." Their evenings became precious routines. After dinner, they'd often sit together on their newly repaired porch, watching the neighborhood settle into twilight. Children rode bikes past their house, parents called them in for dinner, and the sky painted itself in brilliant colors. One such evening, Emily brought out 2 glasses of iced tea and settled beside Jack on the porch swing he'd installed. The setting sun cast long shadows across their small lawn, where spring flowers were just beginning to bloom. "I love our life," Emily said softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. Jack wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "Me too, Em. Me too." They sat together, watching the sky turn from gold to pink, their home solid and welcoming behind them, their future stretching out before them like an open road. The community center buzzed with activity as Emily made her way through the entrance. She'd started volunteering here on weekends, offering basic first aid classes. But today, she was here for a different reason. Through the glass doors of the main meeting room, she could see Jack setting up chairs in a circle. 3 months ago, the center's director had approached Jack after hearing his story through a mutual friend. She'd asked if he'd consider speaking to some of the troubled teens who came through their doors. Jack had hesitated at first, unsure if anyone would want to hear from someone with his past. But Emily had encouraged him, seeing how his eyes lit up at the possibility of helping others avoid his mistakes. Now, watching him through the glass, Emily noticed how different he looked. His tattoos were still visible beneath his rolled-up sleeves, but they seemed less intimidating somehow. He'd kept his beard, but trimmed it neatly, and his once rigid posture had softened. He moved with purpose, rather than tension. Mrs. Martinez, who ran the corner store where they bought their groceries, stopped beside Emily. "Your James is doing wonderful work here," she said, smiling warmly. "My nephew Marco attended his talk last week. Hasn't missed a day of school since." Emily's heart swelled with pride. It wasn't just Mrs. Martinez. The whole neighborhood had slowly changed their view of Jack. Mr. Chen now saved his best tomatoes for him, knowing Jack's newfound love for gardening. The local mechanics sought his advice on tough repairs, respecting his knowledge rather than fearing his past. Through the glass, Emily watched as teenagers began filing into the room. Some slouched in their chairs, arms crossed defensively. Others wore the same hard mask she'd once seen on Jack's face. But as Jack began to speak, she saw those masks start to crack. He never sugarcoated his story. He talked about the allure of gang life, the false sense of family, the illusion of power, the addiction to danger. But he also spoke about the cost, the constant fear, the crushing guilt, the bridges burned with real family. He shared how he'd almost lost everything, including his chance at love, because of choices he'd made as a young man. What touched Emily most was how he listened. When a boy in a ragged jacket spoke about his alcoholic father, Jack didn't offer empty platitudes. He shared his own story of growing up with addiction in his family. When another teen mentioned feeling trapped by his neighborhood's expectations, Jack nodded in understanding. "I know what it's like to feel like your path is already set," he told them, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "But I'm telling you right now, you can choose differently. It won't be easy. Some days it'll feel impossible. But you have people here who believe in you, who will help you find a better way." Emily watched as several of the boys straightened in their chairs, something like hope flickering across their faces. She recognized that look. She'd seen it on Jack's face the day he'd decided to leave his old life behind. The session continued, and Emily noticed how naturally Jack connected with these young men. He spoke their language but never talked down to them. He understood their struggles but refused to let them use those struggles as excuses. Most importantly, he showed them living proof that change was possible. Standing there, watching the man she loved help others find their way out of darkness, Emily felt a deep sense of rightness. This was who Jack had always been meant to be. Not just someone who had escaped his past, but someone who used that past to light the way for others. The summer evening air was thick with the scent of cotton candy and grilled corn as Emily and Jack made their way through the town's annual Heritage Festival. Colored lights strung between lampposts cast a warm glow over the crowded streets, and the sound of children's laughter mingled with live music from the main stage. Emily squeezed Jack's hand as they walked past Mrs. Chen's food stall. The elderly woman beamed at them, waving enthusiastically. "Jack, Emily, you must try my dumplings," she called out. "Fresh batch, just for you two." Jack's face lit up with a genuine smile, the kind that still made Emily's heart skip a beat. It wasn't the guarded half-smile she'd first seen in him, but something real and warm that reached his eyes. "Wouldn't miss them for the world, Mrs. Chen," he replied, leading Emily to the stall. As they waited for their dumplings, Emily noticed how different things were now. A year ago, people would have crossed the street to avoid Jack. Now they stopped to chat, asking his advice or sharing neighborhood news. The transformation wasn't just in how others saw him. It was in how he carried himself. Officer Thompson, who'd once watched Jack with suspicious eyes, approached them with a friendly wave. "Great turnout at the youth center yesterday, Jack," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Those kids really listened to you. You're making a real difference." Emily watched Jack's cheeks flush slightly at the praise. He still wasn't used to compliments, but she loved how he was learning to accept them. "Just trying to give back," he said quietly, but Emily could hear the pride in his voice. They continued their walk through the festival, stopping to play a few carnival games. Jack's competitive spirit came out at the ring toss, making Emily laugh as he determinedly won her a stuffed bear. She hugged it close, remembering how far they'd come from that first encounter on the street. The festival crowd parted naturally for them, not out of fear, as it once might have, but with respect. Young kids from Jack's mentoring program waved excitedly when they spotted him. Parents who'd once clutched their children closer now smiled and nodded in greeting. Near the ice cream stand, they ran into Emily's parents. The change in them was perhaps the most remarkable of all. Her father, who'd once forbidden her from seeing Jack, now engaged him in conversation about the garden they were planning. Her mother fussed over them both, insisting they join the family for Sunday dinner. As darkness fell, the crowd began gathering in the park for the fireworks display. Jack found them a quiet spot on a grassy hill, spreading out a blanket he'd brought. Emily settled against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Remember our first festival together?" she asked softly. "You wouldn't even come into the main square." Jack's arms tightened around her. "Felt like I didn't belong," he admitted, like everyone was just waiting for me to mess up. "And now..." He paused, looking around at the families spread out on blankets nearby, at the kids running with sparklers, at the community that had become their home. Now I finally feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. The first firework burst overhead, painting the sky in brilliant gold. Emily watched the colors reflect in Jack's eyes, seeing in them not just the man he'd become, but the strength it had taken to get here. Each explosion of light illuminated the faces around them, faces that now showed acceptance, friendship, and trust. She leaned back into Jack's embrace as more fireworks lit up the night sky, their hearts beating in sync, their love as bright as the stars above. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.